Hey everyone, Anthony here from MTG Alpha, back with another deck tech video. We're doing a paper deck tech on Nekusar the Mindrazer. This is one of my personal decks that I've had for a really long time. Nekusar is a wheel and deal commander, essentially. Costs 5, costs 2 colorless, and grixis blue, black, red. 2/4. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. That's good, right? Everyone likes drawing cards. Whenever an opponent draws a card, though, Nekusar deals 1 damage to that player. So people do not like Nekusar at all. They want to draw cards on their own terms, and they don't want the added caveat of being dealt damage every time they draw a card. So it's kind of a way to slow people down, but it's a great way to take advantage of people drawing cards. And so what we do in the deck is we run lots of wheels where they would discard their hand and draw 7, or discard their hand, draw that many, or shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library and draw 7. Those any sort of effect like that, like wheel type effects, we run to force our opponents to draw cards. And now, because most of the time, if they're going to be drawing 7, they're going to be discarding their hand at least. So we have ways in this deck we can benefit from ourselves drawing cards. We can benefit from our opponents drawing cards, essentially more than just dealing damage. We can benefit by discarding cards ourselves, and we can benefit by our opponents discarding cards. Then we have ways to take advantage of what's in the graveyard. So we're forcing things in the graveyard, check, drawing lots of cards, discarding lots of cards, and we have ways to exploit all of those things. All right, so to start, we have some ramp here: Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Talisman of Dominance, Dimir Signet. Nightscape Familiar is great. Blue and red spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So the deck is mostly blue and red. I believe I had the red version of this in the deck, and it was blue and black spells cost 1 less, but the deck happens to be mostly blue and red, I believe. Actually, I'm not sure. I might have to look at that. It was for a while, but I've made some changes to it and went a little bit harder on the discard theme. So I might have to swap this back out, but there's 2 cards that do very similar things, and it reduces the cost of your spells of the by 1, whether it's blue and red or blue and black. As for Told, it's not really ramp, but 3-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on it, and then once each turn you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost of the spell you cast with the CMC that costs extra less, where X is the number of counters on it. So you play this on your upkeep, gets a counter. 1 mana spells are free once each turn. And then next turn, 2 counters, 2 mana spells or less are free once each turn. So that works on, if you have instant speed spells, whenever you can cast it, it works on each turn, not just your own. So very cool card. I like to run it in here. Lightning Greaves is very important. We need to protect our commander because Nekusar is a huge target. Rhystic Study, why not? It's a blue card. We got blue in the deck, so whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1, and then we benefit from drawing cards. So if I've seen anybody consider paying the tax for Rhystic Study, it's in Nekusar, because it's not just us drawing a card, it's us drawing a card and dealing damage. It's us drawing a card and creating a token. It's something. So Propaganda. Another way to slow down our opponents. Creatures can't attack unless they pay 2 for each creature. This isn't a creature heavy deck. We're really just kind of working on slinging spells. So Propaganda is pretty important in here. Now we have ways to, we have some counter spells because we don't have creatures, like I said, so we have to deal with threats as they happen. Pact of Negation. Arcane Denial, really great, 2 mana, counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and you get to draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So they have to weigh out the options. Do they want to draw 2 after getting their spell countered? I It does say up to 2, so they could choose 1. But do they want to take the damage and everything else that's going to come with it? Remand, 2 mana, we get to counter a spell. It goes into their hand instead of the graveyard, which is fine because we're going to wheel them, and we get to draw a card. Perplex, counter target spell unless they discard their hand. So there's some serious consideration going on there. But we could also pay 3 for the transmute cost. Pay 3, discard it, search your library with a card with the same converted mana cost as this, and put it in your hand. So a 3 mana tutor that tutors for a card that's 3 CMC. Pretty good. It's good both ways. And as far as tutors goes, I do have copies of Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor and Grim Tutor and all of that, but kind of doing things a little differently in Nekusar. So I'm running Profane Tutor. Not the best if you don't want to wait 2 turns. It's Demonic Tutor, but you have to suspend it for 2 turns. So CDH players aren't going to be running this, but I like it. I like the card as is, and I'm running it for that reason. We have Mystical Tutor, 1 mana instant. Search for an instant interrupt mana source or sorcery. So basically, search your library for an instant or sorcery card revealed to players, and put it on, after you shuffle, you put it on the top of your library. Instant speed, we're drawing lots of cards. It's going to end up in our hand pretty quickly. We need instants and sorceries. There's one specifically that we want, but board wipes, wheels, whatever we need to get the advantage there. Gamble, 1 mana, search your library for a card, put it in your hand, then discard a card at random. So with Gamble, the interesting thing is every time you tutor for a card, the card that you tutor for, you end up discarding. But that's just the way it goes. I'm not too concerned with it because it does suck when you just need that. It's a last-ditch effort. You just need that board wipe and you end up discarding it, and that feels bad. Again, you can just pay 1 extra, throw Demonic Tutor in here, get what you need, get in, get out. But I got it in there for flavor. Most of the time, if I'm discarding a card, I'm going to get something out of it. So Gamble, not great as a act of desperation, but it's fun. It's flavorful. Toxic Deluge. So we're not gaining a lot of life, so you got to be careful. We are taking some damage sometimes. I did take out this one card that deals a serious amount of damage to us. I forget what it's called. It's a red-black enchantment, and whenever any player draws a card, they're dealt 1 damage. And I've lost to that a couple times because we're all drawing cards. So, but you got to be a little careful with Toxic Deluge. It's good though as another board wipe. You might be able to run Languish or something if you notice that your life total is running low most of the time, but pay X life, all creatures get -X. That's great though because it gets around Indestructible and other things, and it's just a way to guarantee that we can get rid of these threats on the board. Damnation, of course, 4 mana, destroy all creatures. And then Cyclonic Rift, of course, 7 mana overload, return all non-land permanents you don't control to their owner's hand, and then we can just force them to discard their hand, and in some cases draw no cards. So that feels bad. Cyclonic Rift your opponents, and then make them shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library and draw nothing with Notion Thief, I believe it is. Not Hull Breacher anymore because that's banned. Prismari Command, just a good card for Izzet. 3 mana instant speed, choose 2, deal 2 damage to any target. Target player draws 2, then discards 2. That kind of fits the theme here. Target player creates a treasure token, so this can end up being, you're netting really just like your net loss is 2 because you gain 1 out of it. Or destroy target artifact, which is pretty important. Baleful Mastery, 4 mana instant, but if you could pay 2, and if you do, an opponent draws a card. So 2 mana instant speed, exile target creature or planeswalker, and then an opponent draws a card. We love our opponents drawing cards. So really good targeted removal in Nekusar. Bedevil, we got Dreadbore. Okay. And then for so Ob Nixilis, this planeswalker you can -2. That can happen twice unless you have ways to get counters on planeswalkers. Destroy target creature, its controller draws 2 cards. Great. And whenever an opponent draws a card, deal 1 damage to that player. So targeted removal, but now we're getting into ways where we benefit from our opponents drawing cards. So Cataract Parasite, whenever an opponent draws a card, if you control a red permanent, which you most likely do, then it deals 1 damage to that player. Other ways we benefit from our card draw here would be at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card and loses 1 life. So Fevered Visions, at the beginning of each player's end step, they draw a card. If that player is your opponent and they have 4 or more cards in hand, deal 2 damage to them. So this is where they're getting punished for drawing cards. Whenever an opponent draws a card, deal 1 damage to that player. All these effects stack. It's great. Fire-Exing Tyranny. Whenever a player draws a card, they lose 2 life unless they pay 2. So more things that are stacking. Notion Thief. If an opponent would draw a card, except the first one he or she draws in each of their draw steps, instead they skip that draw and you draw a card. So this card feels pretty bad, just like Hall Breacher, but it's arguably less salty. Okay. 4 mana, 3/1 with Flash, and then we can force our opponents to discard their hand. And instead of drawing 7, we draw, they draw nothing. They just get 1 card on their draw step. I'm gonna seize. So this should be, whatever. This is us benefiting from drawing cards. So whenever you draw a card, put a 4 shadow counter on it, and you could remove 8 4 shadow counters to create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token. It also has cycling too. So all the cards that we're drawing, we can start creating 8/8 Krakens. We can start putting a 1/1 counter on Chasm Stalker, and when it dies, we get that many 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk. Whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses a life, and Psychosis Crawler's power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your hand. And we do have Reliquary Tower, so no maximum hand size is possible. Whenever we draw a card, deal 1 damage to any target. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. Niv-Mizzet is a G, 6 mana, 5/5 with flying, can't be countered. You can be running Curiosity. What is it? Tandem Lookout or something. There's 3 spells that you could run to go infinite with Niv. This originally was a Niv-Mizzet deck, but I got bored of how linear it was as an Izzet deck. It is fun, again, but just gets really old really quickly. So I took out the combo piece and just kept Niv in the 99. We also got Niv-Mizzet the Firemind, similar effect. 2 colorless, 2 blue, 2 red, 4/4 flyer. Whenever you draw a card, deal 1 damage to target creature or player, and you could tap it to draw a card. And now we have the, sort of wheel type effects. Burning Inquiry, 1 mana sorcery. Each player draws 3, then discards 3 at random. It's just a fun little gamble, but at 1 mana, we're basically wheeling half of what you would typically see, making them discard cards and draw cards. Really good. Days Undoing, 3 mana. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. If it's your turn, end the turn. So maybe try to do this lastly. Teferi's Puzzle Box, 4 mana artifact. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player puts the cards in their hand on the bottom of their library in any order, then draws that many. They draw their card for the turn first. So untap, upkeep, draw a card, then take the cards from your hand, put them on the bottom, and then draw that many. Forced Fruition, 6 mana. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, they draw 7 cards. So you can, if you're lucky enough with it, you can actually, towards the end of the game, you could start to end the game with this. Just be careful because you might be giving them. See, that's kind of like the downside of Nekusar, is you're giving your opponents such card advantage if they have a way to offset the damage, or if you're not dealing damage to them and just letting them draw cards. Like it's happened. You can go check out an episode we did versus Mimoplasm where the whole plan backfired. Mimoplasm is good against Nekusar because there are ways to take advantage of all that quicker than you can take out your opponent. Dark Deal is a wheel effect. Each player discards all the cards in their hand, draws that many -1. Reforge the Soul is a 5-mana sorcery, and you wheel. So I'm just going to start, just let you guys know, wheel essentially is discarding your hand and drawing 7 cards. All right. But it has Miracle, so you can pay 2 if it's the first card you drew that turn. Then at that point, it's just Wheel of Fortune, which is great. Whirlpool Warrior enters the battlefield, shuffle all the cards from your hand into your library, then draw that many. Then you can pay a red to sacrifice it, and each player wheels, except they draw that many cards instead of 7. So they shuffle the cards from their hand into their library, then they draw however many that was. Jace's Archivist, pay a blue, tap it. Each player discards their hand, draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded that way. Another one is like what, Winds of Change or something. For 1 mana, you get a wheel type effect. That I'm considering to add into the deck. I just don't know what I would take out. As you can tell, there's lots of wheel effects. Windfall, each player discards their hand, draws cards equal to the greatest number. Incendiary Command, a 5 mana, you get to choose 2, and one of those would be each player discards their hand, draws that many cards. It also can destroy a non-basic land, deal 4 to a target player, or deal 2 to each creature. So, you know, going up against tokens or some little guys, then a little board wipe and wheel. Echo of Eons with some gorgeous artwork on the card. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards, and it has a flashback cost of 3. So for 6 mana, it's a little costly, but you have that flashback cost of 3. If this ends up being one of the cards that you discard at any point in the game, then you're just paying 3 for it once. Not bad. Molten Psyche is another wheel effect. Each player shuffles the cards from their hand into their library, then draws that many. If you control 3 or more artifacts, though, deal damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards that they drew this turn. So you might be able to play this in a way that you're going to get the most optimal amount of damage out of your opponents. 3 artifacts in this deck. I mean, you got treasure tokens, you got soul rings and signets and stuff, so it's not impossible. Expansion Explosion, 2 mana, copy target instant or sorcery with mana cost 4 or less. So we can copy Molten Psyche, that'll be juicy. And you could also cast the explosion cost X, 2 blue, 2 red, to deal X damage to any target, and then target player draws X cards. You can choose to draw cards or force them to draw cards and just double up on the damage. Alright, so we got some, yep. So we are benefiting from our opponent's discarding cards. Torek, when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, target opponent discards 2 cards at random. Whenever an opponent discards a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Torek, and it has protection from white. So you have a little bit of invasion, which is good for how big it can potentially get. Liliana's Caress, whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. Whenever an opponent discards a creature, you get a 2/2 black zombie creature token. If they discard a land, you get 2 black mana to your mana pool. And if an opponent discards a non-creature, non-land, you get to draw a card. Really good card. Waste Not is one of my favorite cards. Megrim, whenever an opponent discards a card, deal 2 to that player, similar to Liliana's Caress, except it costs 1 more. Sangromancer, 4 mana, 3/3 flyer. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may gain 3 life. So we definitely need lifelink in the deck. We need to gain life. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may gain 3 life. Really good way of gaining life in Nekusar. Turgid, kind of like a hidden Turgid commander in the deck, because whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It has Menace. Turgid's nasty in here. With all the wheeling you're doing, you're just getting all those cards on your side of the battlefield. I wouldn't be surprised if Turgid ends up getting banned. Really, the Everwise. 3 mana, 0/3, gets +1/+0 for each instant or and sorcery card in your graveyard. So, okay, it might get sort of big, who knows. But whenever you discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many. So if you wheel once, you're going to double the amount of cards you're drawing. Just once a turn though. Surly Badgersaur, whenever you discard a creature card, get a 1/1 counter. It's kind of like Waste Not. Whenever you discard a land, create a treasure token. Cool, we need artifacts. Whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land, Surly Badgersaur fights up to one target creature you don't control. With the counters on it, that's pretty relevant. Pretty cool, little dino. Arc Fiend of Ifnir. Flying, whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. So this is a semi-board wipey, board control-y card. Really good card. It has cycling too. Whenever you discard a creature, this is the opposite of Waste Not. 5 mana. It's on a creature though for 4/4. Whenever you discard a creature card, create a 2/2 black zombie. Whenever you discard a land, add 2 black mana. Whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land, draw a card. And then we have stuff to benefit from cards being in graveyards. Reanimate. Putting a creature card from any graveyard into play under your control. You do lose life equal to its total CMC though. Dothy Voidwalker, 3/2 with Shadow. If a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead you exile it, which is great. We definitely want to be exiling cards and not just feeding them into their little graveyard shenanigans, if any, that they have. It exiles it with a void counter. Sacrifice Dothy. You can choose an exile card an opponent owns with a void counter on it and play it without paying its mana cost. Very cool. All the cards that we're wheeling are going into the graveyard and then being exiled with void counters if we have Dothy out, and then we can just tap sack it and then get any one of those things for free. Great. Nicol Bolas. Yeah, enters the battlefield. Each opponent discards a card. You can pay 7. It's kind of costly, but you exile it, return it transformed. You can only do this as a sorcery. And then you get Nicol Bolas, the Arisen, Planeswalker. 7 loyalty counters, plus it to draw 2. -3 to deal 10 damage to target creature or planeswalker. -4 to put a creature or planeswalker from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control at no additional cost. And -12 to exile all but the bottom card of target player's library. And then just make them draw it and discard it anyways. I haven't had a chance to cast it yet because Nicol Bolas is definitely got target on his back. Consuming Aberration also benefits from the cards in our opponent's graveyards. Its power and toughness is equal to that many cards. And whenever you cast a spell, they reveal cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land, and they put all those cards in the graveyard, which makes them bigger. Consuming Aberrations. Pretty fun, boy. Rise of the Dark Realms. 9 mana, pretty costly card here, but you get to put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control, and then your opponent's scoop. So basically 9 mana, sorcery, win the game. Haven't pulled it off yet, but it would feel so good. And when the time comes, if everyone scoops, I'm gonna be sad. Crypt Incursion, so good. 3 mana instant, exile all creatures from target player's graveyard. You gain 3 life for each card exiled this way. You can gain so much life from this card in this deck, in decks similar. Any sort of milling deck, if you're running like Dimir Mill, throw a Crypt Incursion in there and let me know how it does. Instant speed. And you're getting rid of all their creatures that could potentially be threats. You just gotta be careful though. I mean, it's like a Hail Mary because you're running low on health and you need to gain some life. But yeah, the only thing that there are some nombos, like some of the other graveyard reliant cards end up being less powerful, but it is good to dig yourself out of a hole. So yeah, that's all the cards. Then we have the lands in here. So real quick, we got a swamp, an island, a mountain, and another island. So those are the basics. We're running 4 basics in here. Got Command Tower, of course. And then we have the little buddy lands, Sulfur, Dragon Skull, and Drowned Catacomb. We got the 3 shocks. Okay. Training Center and Morphic Pool. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control unless you have 2 or more opponents. So any 4-person commander game, 3-person even. It's really good card. Clearwater Pathway, blue, or you could play the black side of it. River Glide, Is It colors. Reliquary Tower, no maximum hand size. We got the cycle lands here. So enters tapped and taps for grixis, one of them. Or you can just pay a black, discard it, pay a blue, discard it, pay a red, discard it, and draw a card. Drawing cards is good, so we got that in there. We got a slow fetch, Bad River. Search for a island or swamp. Bloodstained Mire. Polluted Delta, Scalding Tarn. Kind of like these for fetchable lands. So Sulphur Mire, Volatile Fjord, into Ice Tunnel, since they got the land subtypes there. Crumbling Necropolis is good. Ender's tapped, and you can tap it for 1 of Grixis, blue, black, or red. Not bad. Crosses Catacombs, really good. I love these lair cards, by the way. It is a lair, and when it comes into play, sacrifice it unless you return a non-lair you control to its owner's hand. So just a basic, could be whatever, shock land. And then it taps for 1 of those 3 colors that you need. Crypt of the Eternals doesn't come in tapped. Enters the battlefield to gain a life. Taps for a colorless, or you can filter a colorless into filter any color into the color you need. Sunken Hollow, Spire Bluff Canal, Shivan Reef, Shadowblood Ridge, Cascade Bluffs, and Bajuka Bog, which comes in handy when you're dumping things into your opponent's graveyard. You might want to exile all those cards. Mimoplasm. Anyways, that's Nekusar. I'll have a link to the deck in the description. So check it out. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you guys think. Nekusar is one of my favorite decks. I really do enjoy playing it. So let me know what cards you would add. I'm always looking to make upgrades. I love hearing the different cards that people add. I like hearing those cards that I just, those niche cards I didn't know existed. And if I was able to, if there were any cards in here that you didn't know about, yeah, give it a try. Let me know how it is. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. And I do appreciate all that support. Got a bunch of links in the description for you to check out. So yeah, until next time, peace.
Wow.